this is now another bearish pattern developing, and we probably have further downside. Again, I think we'll stop around, there'll be a big level around 12 to 13,000, but it wouldn't shock me to see us go down to 9,000 on the charts at this point. So I continue to be bearish in early 2023. I will say this, is that I expect Bitcoin to put it, you would see a major dip. And it's one of those scenarios where for me, I'd probably put out a buy order and go to sleep on Bitcoin at like $3,000. I mean, it could be one of those scenarios where you see something like that occur. Yeah. The crazy thing.
Did you know that a new black swan even may be about to happen in Bitcoin? According to Gareth Soloway from InTheMoneyStocks.com and VerifiedInvestingCrypto.com, if what you are going to listen to in this video happens, you could see a major dip in Bitcoin overnight and wake up with your money gone. And if Bitcoin is struggling right now, this could be the end of crypto as we know it. So pay close attention to ensure you are not suddenly affected by a potential wipeout. First, let's see what Gareth's Bitcoin price prediction for 2023 is.
So there's no doubt that Bitcoin is still struggling. And I think the biggest example of how Bitcoin is struggling right now is you obviously saw the collapse on the back of FTX. And then since then, the stock market until really the last week or so had been trending neutral to higher. And we didn't see that in the Bitcoin chart. Even though the Bitcoin chart usually follows risk assets like the stock market, we weren't seeing that. And that makes a lot of sense. Investors are nervous. They don't know what to believe, what not to believe in the crypto markets these days after FTX really threw a big curveball. And so I think for me, it's continuing to recognize the chart that we're in a downtrend. You can clearly see that, again, this is now another bearish pattern developing, and we probably have further downside. Again, I think we'll stop around, there'll be a big level around 12 to 13,000, but it wouldn't shock me to see us go down to 9,000 on the charts at this point. So I continue to be bearish in early 2023. I will say this, is that I expect Bitcoin to put in a bottom probably around mid-year, probably around $9,000. And I think finally it will coordinate with the next kind of bounce, although the bull market will take years to develop.
So, according to Gareth, now it's the time to go bearish finally. He has been saying that Bitcoin is reaching the 9,000 area for a while. But what you probably didn't hear yet is that that's happening even with the biggest wave of new investors ever coming in.
I did read that I think November there was the most investors ever bought into Bitcoin that owned less than one Bitcoin. So basically it was the small investor buying in, which number one, it tells me it's not quite the bottom yet, right? Generally, that's not the way bottoms work. It's usually the smaller investors are the ones freaking out while the whales accumulate. But I do think that you will get to a point when you get towards that 10,000 level-ish, give or take, where big money starts to say, all right, listen, what's my risk reward here? Do I think that Bitcoin's going to survive? How much is it down? Are we going to eventually get common sense regulation that clarifies where this thing can potentially go in the future? And I do think that digital gold is where it's going to be at for Bitcoin. Now, the security side, meaning the alts and how they're classified, that's a little grayer, right? Because we don't know, is it going to be like the same sort of regulation that stocks have to abide by, which doesn't really make sense? Or will there be a new set of ground rules for these alts that they have to do reporting and auditing and different things like that? And I hope it's a positive thing. It's one of those things that, again, there's a little bit of angst in me to see what that's going to be. Yeah, so I think the whales do start nibbling. I think the key is to see some sort of framework. In fact, and again, I'm no whale by any stretch, but I have a small investment of my overall net worth in Bitcoin, a tiny bit in Ethereum as well. And the reason why I'm not ready to go in more right now is I want to know that we have some regulatory framework coming. And I think as soon as we get a hint of it, remember, the market and whales aren't going to wait for it to pass. They're not going to wait for it to become law. It's going to be the framework that we look at, and we can say, okay, this is what's going to most likely come to fruition, and then we're going to start to buy and accumulate. And that's really what I'm waiting for. But I think it does happen in 2023. I really liken the Lehman Brothers collapse in 2008 to what happened with FTX in terms of each industry. From the ruins, we saw Dodd-Frank emerge in the banking markets. I think something like that will come across. And I also think you can look at the Lehman Brothers collapse and say, okay, how long did it take for investors to psychologically flush down before a bottom was made in the S&P 500. And that was about 5 to 6 months. In addition, the S&P dropped about 45%. So if you look at when FTX occurred versus when Lehman, you go out 5 to 6 months and you drop Bitcoin down about 45%, which puts us give or take around that $10,000 level. And that might give us a basis to kind of get involved as a long investor. And I think, again, you're going to see this coincide perfectly with that regulation being unveiled. It's going to be, this is what's exciting for me, is that to me, I finally see the end of the bear market. Doesn't mean we're going to roar back to all-time highs, but at least it's getting closer.
But before we get to the craziest prediction he ever made that will probably make you think twice about your investments, let's have a quick look at some altcoins.
I think for the most part, it is lockstep. I mean, not to the exact penny, obviously. We do see generally Ethereum behave slightly different. I think the positive thing for Ethereum is that you have the low going back to June over here, and we have yet to take that low out versus what you've seen on Bitcoin. So you could argue that Ethereum is behaving a little bit stronger. But for me, everything comes back to, if Bitcoin's going to go down to 12 or 9,000, it's hard to imagine a scenario where at least Ethereum doesn't decline somewhat, right? I mean, you got to figure that they're somewhat correlated. Having said that, I also think that investors should be welcoming and encouraging the regulation. We need to get this regulation. If you want to bottom in Bitcoin, if you want these assets to start to trade up, you have to get clarity in the sector. You have to know what these exchanges are doing with your assets that you're putting on the exchanges, and obviously, you know, that there's no shenanigans going on, and no big money is going to come in this sector at this stage. I mean, that's the biggest negative here, is that to attract new big money is almost impossible now that FTX blew up. Matic, again, has the positive to this chart is that you're well off of the lows from earlier in 2022. So there's not many coins that you can look at that have that are up still over 100% off of their lows in 2022. Having said that, what's a little concerning, you have this upsloping white trend line that is now, it's trying to break to the downside. If it does, you have 70% support and then finally down to about 61 cent support. But again, the hope, if you're a bull, is you want to see price get back above this white trend line and hold there. And you can see that every time you hit this line, you are getting a bounce off of it. So again, it tells us that it's a significant level or polygon. For me, it's just watching that trend line. So right now we are a tad below, but we haven't confirmed the move yet. So for me, it would just be watching. If it confirms, then you have to have a slight negative bias, at least until about 70 cents. Now listen, it's at 78 cents, so it's not that far of a move. But in the short term, any sort of confirmation below this trend line, which is around 79, 80 cents, that would be problematic in the near term for Matic.
What about stable coins?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, the biggest thing with stable coins is the digital dollar, if the Fed goes ahead with that, right? And to me, that's a big concern. It's one of the reasons why I shy away from holding US Tether or USDC, is because of that aspect of what does it mean when the government creates essentially its own stable coin and processes, you know, these transactions can be processed just the same. So I think for me, that is the biggest concern. And for me, it's saying, okay, we were talking about Ethereum, how it might have a leg down. And by the way, I agree with that. If the Ripple determination does not come out in the form that is good for Ripple, it would probably translate to all the altcoins in terms of them being classified as securities, right? So that would signal that you could see that leg down in Ethereum and some of the other altcoins. Going back to stable coins, for me, again, it's a big concern of mine. We know that the US dollar, digital dollar, is coming, and I don't know how or what the regulatory impact will be on these stable coins.
Now, with that in mind, how and why can we expect a crazy event that can affect prices drastically again?
The crazy thing about it is that if the government really wanted to get rid or really put roadblocks in crypto or in Bitcoin specifically, this would be one way they could do it. They could deny the grayscale conversion to an ETF. And by doing that, you're going to create some very hazardous periods. And again, remember, crypto's already like a wounded animal, right? I mean, it's already gotten some wounds. It's struggling. FTX didn't do us any favors here. If you wanted to put that nail in the coffin, that would be one way to do it. Let's hope that's not their intention.
So, can this be the end of crypto?
Regardless of where Bitcoin is, I mean, blockchain technology is here to stay. It's going to be the main driver, and there is so much that can kind of evolve off of it, off of these networks. So I agree with you, and I think the beautiful thing about it is that you now have a scenario where there's so many people that love crypto, that have jobs that in some way, shape, or form rely on crypto, that it makes it almost impossible to kind of get rid of it. It's just a matter of getting the proper regulation in place.
What do you think? Can Grayscale become the next Black Swan event and be responsible for a new wipeout in Bitcoin? If this happens, can it be even worse than the FTX dip we have all been facing? Let us know in the comments below, and if you want to see more daily crypto videos, please leave a like and subscribe. Thanks.